So it turns out people like watching me suffer. Not only that, but they want me to suffer even more. A few months ago, a modder by the name of RedRafe sent me a scenario called Double Trouble. And let me tell ya, this trouble was more than doubled. The scenario was designed to annoy a couple dozen people playing together. Now here I am, all alone, and not at all ready for what I was getting into. Normally I'd go over the rules here, but I didn't know what those were going in. All I really know is that the challenge gets worse as we research, and this mod will emotionally destroy me. So with that, let's get started. This intro pop-up had some nice info which I definitely read. The warnings about were especially helpful. Knowing that, I mined some rocks, crafted a few furnaces, and I can't place furnaces. What? Why do I get ore from rocks if I can't build a furnace? I spent the next couple minutes wandering aimlessly for something, anything. I even read the intro pop-up warning me about cave-in, so obviously there was a cave somewhere. Barely 5 minutes in, and I had to use up my free hint. Add another row. That wasn't even part of the challenge. This has got to be tough. Now that I'm in the caves, I can find a shop, some resource patches, and a few more rocks than normal. Even more important though, I can build down here and finally smelt ore. Power on the other hand, that's still a conundrum. Hopefully there's water somewhere down here. I was out of ideas, so I checked the shop in hopes of getting some direction. One item caught my eye. The tunnel. Perfect. That should let me tunnel deeper in search of water. All I was missing was the 1,000 coins to buy it. Each rock dropped about 3 coins, so I only needed a few hundred rocks. If only there was some place where I could mine an excessive amount of rocks. Oh right, literally everywhere. Fortunately, there were some boons to aid me in this bane of my existence. Experience points. The more I mine, the faster I mine. It's only 10% per level, but every little bit helps. Wait, did you see that? I thought I saw a flash of yellow. Wait, there's another one. I couldn't read what it said, but ow! I'm taking damage? Ah, I get it now. My inventory is full, so of course I took damage. Mining involved a lot of dump chests. Chests like these to smelt ore while I mine more coins. If I didn't carry storage with me, I died. After embracing my dwarven roots, I could finally afford the tunnel and move on to the next layer. Turns out I was completely wrong about what it does. It's really just a big chest to pass resources between layers. I should have paid more attention to the starting screen, because it did tell me. That's when it hit me. I've only tested placing furnaces so far. Other stuff might be placeable up here. Yup. After 30 minutes, I finally understood the most basics of the scenario. Now we can finally play Factorio, not whatever Minecraft nightmare this was. First up is the power plant. I haven't unlocked filter inserters yet, so I had to make do without them. The recent update made every inserter filterable, but this happened way before that. Instead, I had to get a bit clever. Boiler pass-through. Only fuel can be inserted into the boiler, so direct feeding ignores the plates in the tunnel and just grabs the coal. The coal then gets extracted from the boiler and placed on a belt. The burner inserters weren't a necessary part of this, I just haven't managed to break the habit yet. Anyway, now we have a functional power plant and can research automation. It took way too long to get assemblers. With how wide the silo is, it's fairly easy to set up a mall that takes directly from it. There's no need for any belts or hand feeding, everything is accessible from one giant chest. While the basics were crafting, I cleared some space for a small smelting lane. This is the first challenge run I've done where building is normal, and I had to spend 10 seconds mining rocks for every single furnace that was placed. Oh, it's also really dark, but you could probably see that by now. I wasn't bothered by the darkness, but chat really wanted me to place lamps. I felt like such a suburban dad when my first response was to complain about their energy consumption. Anyway, it took nearly 10 minutes to build half of a smelting lane. And I still need to place the drills. These patches were awful. Take this coal patch for example. 8,000 coal. That's almost as bad as Factorio's lowest settings. Once those are up, I went back to the smelting lane where, again, I have to mine so many rocks. My inventory kept getting cluttered and damaging me, so I had to build some dump chests with priority so they drain first. If you need another example about how poor these ore patches are, I got almost as many resources mining these rocks as I will from these drills. The drills felt even more worthless as my mining speed leveled up, and even more so once I unlocked steel axe and doubled my hand mining rate. Still, I didn't want to hand mine forever, so I hooked up the drills to a mixed ore sorter. It consists of a series of filters that send ore to the proper smelters or feeds them directly into the silo. On the surface, I built a few additional buffer chests to ensure things didn't back up. With plates automated, I have a continuous stream of research and discovered a new feature of the mod. Science is broken down into tiers, making it significantly more annoying to queue research and forget about it. But that's not actually the main problem here. every time our research finishes, I get one of two pop-ups. Nothing has changed, or a new layer has been revealed. The former is self-explanatory, but the latter, it means another debuff is added. More research tiers means more debuffs. That's fun. The first one we got, rotten egg. I don't know what that means yet, but it sounds pretty ominous. For now, I kept working on what I did know, such as automation. The silo mall was already at capacity, so I swapped over to a more standard mall for basic resources. Gears, circuits, belts, and some inserters. Each of these had really limited buffers to prevent wasting precious resources. Also, there's no trees in this mod, so the basic power poles are crafted out of metal. It didn't affect much, but I figured someone might ask. Since the mall was ready, science could just steal from it with little effort, and the labs went right next to those assemblers. I was feeling pretty good about the mod so far, but it was about to get a lot worse. Remember how I said every tech has a chance to add something new to the challenge? And also how each tech is divided into multiple tiers for more unlocks? Well, that means I just rolled a dozen dice in a matter of minutes and discovered some new challenges. One of which was a neat little bonus while we're clearing rocks. Poof. The cave can collapse. Cool. The intro tips make a lot more sense now. You must construct additional pylons is not just a StarCraft quote. It was telling me I needed to buy dungeon support pylons from the shop. Once acquired, all I needed to do was place them as I cleared rocks. The general idea is simple enough, but clearing small sections of rocks at a time only to stop and build supports really interrupted the building flow. This lane took way too long to finish because of that. Long enough that I finished researching Automation 2 Tier 1 and unlocked magic drills. Which means, I'm gonna be honest here, I have no idea what this did. If you have any guesses, let me know down in the comments. And maybe sub while you're down there. I'm really close to 10k, so it means a lot. My best guess is drill that shoots fireballs, and I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. I even tried googling to see if anything came up when I searched magic. Still nothing. And yes, I unironically referred to searching the tech tree as googling. This is a direct quote from the run. Let's see, if I Google magic, nothing pops up. Maybe one day I'll figure it out. Kind of like how I figured out how to prevent cave-ins eventually. There's a small dust animation when the cave is about to collapse. It was obvious to everybody but me, but in my defense, I'm pretty tunnel visioned. Or more like doubtful. There was a part of me who saw the dust earlier, but I didn't trust anything at this point. However, when I did believe my eyes, I had two options. Placing a support immediately to prevent a cave-in, or waiting until the final warning is given and treating it as a QuickTime event. With either option, I still needed loads of supports. They prevented cave-ins in what seemed to be an 8x8 area, which yields about 200 coins when mined. If I got desperate, I could farm cave-ins indefinitely and use those coins to buy another dungeon support. Thankfully, the supports are craftable. Eventually. They needed low density structure, which is a blue science tech, and that's quite a ways away. The shop will have to do for now. So to summarize, I not only have to mine rocks in order to build, I have to protect myself from having to mine even more of them. To make matters worse, my mouse started to malfunction. That might be on me for abusing my mouse, but the last thing I needed right now was random misplacements from a faulty mouse. And to make matters even worse, the mod was full of puns. What is a mermaid but a deep sea fish? Really? Really? Just let me get one smelting lane done before 2 hours have passed. I really should get back to the smelter though. I haven't even done the smelter inputs yet. Huh. The mouse jumped a lot that time. Okay, now that one made it clear. Anything I'm holding can be auto-placed around me. That's fun. Didn't help that chat was completely on board with gaslighting me and pretended the chest wasn't there. I think we're good on new effects for a bit. Let's get back to the base. Stone has almost no use at the moment, so I sent that to a buffer along with uranium and then finished the smelter from earlier. It only took a couple minutes of building until I noticed there was another new effect. Permanent buildings. In a span of 15 seconds, I went through 4 of the 5 stages of grief. Denial. Oh no, why? No. Anger. Why? Why would you do this? Bargaining. Can I destroy it? Okay, so at least there's that. And acceptance. So they're just unmineable sometimes. Cool. But as you might have heard, they can be destroyed. It's a lot more work and a lot more wasteful than mining, but at least I can remove the pesky belts. Quite effective if you ask me. Now I can finally say my first smelters are complete. 2 hours in. As a quick heads up, expanding furnaces and drills was incredibly monotonous and it basically looked like this the entire time. I reckon I spent about 12 hours mining rocks and dealing with cave-ins, probably more. As we move forward, I'll highlight any changes that mix up the monotony, but the actual lane expansions won't be covered in a ton of detail. So if you hear me mention an expansion, it's effectively me repeating this process for half an hour or more. I just thought it was worth mentioning because only about 3% of the recordings were used in this video, and I really wanted to highlight how mind-numbingly slow this was. Also, I needed this monologue in order to show a good chunk of the expansion at least once before I transition to quick highlights for future expansions. It feels like I've shown enough now, so in short, it's slow. Steel furnaces were looking mighty appealing right about now. They're pricey, but having the amount of rocks I had to clear seemed too good to pass up. Thankfully, the shop has a couple items to speed things up while I wait for steel furnaces. Mining and walking speed boosts. They're temporary, but they can stack to speed things up and... Of course it respawns me. Why did I think it would help? That's fine, I'll just grab 2. Easiest purchase of my life. Of course it only lasts 3 seconds. Why did I think it would help? At least I have the speed bonus from leveling my mining skill, which seems to actually work. And you know what? I think I'm getting the hang of things. I'm reacting faster to random auto placements, and cave-ins are much less frequent. All things considered, I'm pretty proud of my progress so far. Now I can answer the question that's been on everyone's mind. Where are the biters? It's happening. For some reason I sounded excited about this attack, like I was waiting in anticipation. 2 hours of being gaslit and I've apparently lost all my ability to process emotions correctly. Yeah, it's fine. Since I can't react to attacks quickly while in the tunnels, I needed to set up some turrets. Turrets that now have a timer added before they activate, so there goes my plan for using them to push the biter bases. Back to plan A. Denial. There are no biter bases. Just kidding. I bought power armor. It only sent me back 1,500 coins, which is nothing considering all the rocks I've mined. Plus, I apparently spawn coins just by walking around. Or maybe I dropped them because there's a hole in my pocket. I don't actually know. Oh, turns out they're actually free. Neat. The coins do occasionally block lanes, but for now they're just a nice boost to my income. Okay, now to use the fruits of our labor. The armor is quite powerful with damage resistance and slots for equipment once I can afford them, but it's potentially cursed since I took damage immediately after equipping it. That could also be a coincidence though. As it turns out, the floor is lava and standing still for too long damages me. I know I've listed a bunch of effects in the past few minutes, but I wasn't kidding when I said getting labs up made things a lot worse. I'm still not fully convinced that these are all real, so I think I'll rename the list on screen to what I think I know so far. I'm completely confident the biters are real though. It's a good thing I bought that armor when I did because I was not prepared to push biter bases. I felt even less prepared once attack waves started appearing from destroyed spawners. I think this might be that rotten egg effect I wasn't sure of. That base push would only hold attacks off for a short while, so I had to ready some more defenses. Turrets work even better with a furnace wall, which, right, I forgot I can't build those. Undefended turrets it is. Look, it's good enough for me to go back into the caves. Down here I expanded the ore sorter to account for all resource types so I can filter mixed mining at a much higher rate than before. It also had a small spot for manually clearing my inventory, which was way nicer than leaving them in a random chest somewhere. Next I took another shopping trip. This time I bought some roboports and, bear with me, solar panels. Look, I thought they would help. Portable solar panels used to work non-stop in Factorio regardless of light level, or at least I thought they did. The changelog makes no mention of this. The scenario is making me paranoid enough to question everything I thought I knew about this game. Disregarding my sanity, I carried on and went back to drill expansions. The ore density was so low that I spread the drills out to reduce overlap. It's slower to build, but the gaps between the drills served as great spots for supports. If I remember to place them in time. Which reminds me, there are cheaper options for dungeon supports. My first thought was power poles because they're tall, but the real solution was walls. They function as simple supports, but they're not quite as good, so I need a lot of them. You know what they say, more is more. I think I'm getting more used to building around cave-ins. It used to take 20 minutes to build 10 drills, and now I can do it in 10. Still not fast, but it's faster. Of course, the scenario couldn't let me get comfortable, so I had to throw another wrench into the works. Many entities now have a chance to get a random rotation. Not a huge issue for drills, but the inserters, those are a whole other story. I'll touch on those in a couple minutes. Right now I needed to fix resource buffers and upgrade the sorter to allow for a higher throughput. I'll need the throughput soon when I mine this really good patch I found. My standards are so low at this point that I consider a patch with 80,000 iron to be really good. For reference, the starter patch on default settings has over 300,000 iron and you can cover the patch in less than an hour. And I'm nearly 3 hours in right now trying to get 80k. Once again, there was a lot of mining rocks, placing drills, and adding supports. Except now there's something else to wreak havoc. Biter nests can spawn when rocks are destroyed, and of course we still have the biters spawning when the nest is destroyed. Despite my lack of preparedness, I did manage to clear the biters, but I was distracted just long enough to not notice the cave-in. I may have won the battle, but I clearly lost the war. After reclaiming my body, I finished up the iron lane and began work on the next project, oil. So far, I've only seen oil in the underground with an output rate of 6%. That sucks, but what sucks even more is that I can't even use it. The tunnel has no pipe inputs on it, and the assemblers aren't placeable underground to use barrels. An update was rolled out to make this possible, but I had already finished by then. That means there's oil up above. Somewhere. Far away. Probably. I think. I was actually told it might not exist, and that I should scout in editor mode first because there's a good chance it spawned on water and got deleted. Fortunately, it did exist, but is on another island. I can't get there quite yet. Making a bridge requires a lot of landfill, which needs more stone. In other words, we need more drills. To speed things up this time, I bought some bots from the market hoping to clear rocks faster. Guess what? Rocks can't be marked for deconstruction in this scenario. Back to hand mining all day, every day. Or at least for about 20 minutes. The bots were able to build supports and drills, but I had to clear small sections at a time to avoid causing cave-ins. Or worse, spawning biters. Now's a good time to mention that I've unlocked the majority of the debuffs. However, the ones that I've unlocked will keep getting more dire, so I'd get things like more frequent auto-building or higher odds of misrotation. The rotations are definitely the worst of those two. There's basically two outcomes for a misrotated inserter. It either does nothing, causing the assembler to idle, or it takes items from the assembler and puts them on the wrong belt. The first one is a lot more common, but the second one can easily happen if you hand feed or if you double up on inserters. And for anyone wondering, bots are not a workaround for this. Their rotations are random too. You know what is a workaround though? Loaders. Yep, this scenario adds loaders into the game. If you're not familiar, loaders are a creative mode entity that moves an entire belt of resources at a time into or out of an inventory. This is much more compact than a handful of inserters, but more importantly, they seem to be immune to random rotations. The only downside that I'm aware of is the cost, basically the equivalent of 10 inserters. I also thought they couldn't be automated because they're a weird button on the side instead of a normal recipe, but it turns out I just never thought to try it. Thankfully I knew I could automate most of them all and, this isn't what the menu looked like earlier. The mod unsorted the crafting list. 3 years of muscle memory ruined in a single day. I can't even find where to craft pipe. Oh, there it is. Okay, now we can get oil, only 4 hours into the run and 1,000 tiles away. What the what? Why? Why is that one of the effects? Whatever, I'm over it. Oil was across the ocean, so I had two options. Option 1, craft a few hundred landfill, or option 2, dig thousands of rocks beneath the ocean, tunnel up, barrel the oil, and send it back across the ocean. Obviously I went for the first one, but I'd be lying if I say I didn't consider the second option. I just wasn't ready to craft the 15,000 barrels I'd need for it. So instead of barrels, I just used a lot of pipe. Factorio fluids have changed a lot since this run, but here's a rough summary of how they used to work. Larger pipe segments have a slower transport rate. This is almost entirely dependent on the number of pipe segments regardless of length. Pipe to grounds can cover a much larger distance per segment, so you can reduce the segment cost by up to 82%. I've never really brought it up before because pipe to grounds are easy to place and it doesn't really affect much. Except now we have auto build to interrupt the dragging. After many misplacements, I made it to the lake and didn't have nearly enough landfill. Unless of course I abused the ocean shore mechanics. Basically, the player can walk across a one tile gap. That nearly halves the required landfill. Nearly half because double segments are occasionally required for the pipes. I know, it's ugly. When I finally crossed the ocean, I cleared out the biter's nest and thought I'd been bamboozled. It seemed like a fake oil field. The first few I looked at showed no production. Fortunately, some were real, so I officially had oil. Oil that I stored in way too many tanks. Yes, this is a recurring theme. These tanks are great, but at least the reasoning here isn't laziness. The buffer will keep my base alive if biters eat the pump jacks. That's not as big of a concern as the land bridge I made. If I could walk across the ocean, so can the biters. Maybe. They can't in vanilla, but I had no trust in this scenario at this point. I guess that's what turrets are for. I only have basic oil processing at the moment, but I made sure the pipes were laid out in such a way that the upgrade to advanced oil would be seamless. That process is a lot more oil efficient, and I'm sure glad I planned for it. The mod has added marathon mode, which is not a sprint meter like I originally thought. Instead, research is just more expensive. Yay! What a perfect synergy with my lack of resources. I can afford to run a whole 6 redship assemblers with all I have. Definitely sufficient when research is 3 times as much. Aside from a few incredibly frustrating rotations, all went well with the oil products. I now had plastic, sulfur, and redship production. It's 1/4 of what I typically build, but it's a start. Before I could even stop to breathe, biters pestered me again. It's time for revenge, now in a sweet new ride. I mean, now on my own 2 feet. With those bases cleared, I was good to finish up oil products in relative safety. Namely, modules and a small amount of blue science. It's enough science to get the first few techs I need, but I'll definitely need to expand this once I unlock bots. Then I learned I'm not safe after all. For two reasons, actually. First off, every turret I place can immediately turn on me. Yeah, immediately. These don't get the delayed startup time like my own turrets. And second, biters can walk on water. It didn't matter that I built the land bridge, they do not need it. So yeah, my priorities are different now. The new goal was to rush bots and build a wall around the entire base. That includes the water since we can't make use of land choke points. Until then, walled off turrets should suffice. As always, bots needed more resources and more power. That meant more drills for ore and some solid fuel for electricity. Oil is practically infinite and coal is not, so it's much better to use solid fuel over coal. Or at least, it's infinite as long as it's alive. I also had to automate assemblers for the first time this run, which was an eye-opening reminder of how slow this has been. 6 hours into a factory builder, and I never had a reason to automate the buildings required for automation. In fact, it was going so slowly that the dev felt benevolent and bumped mining productivity up to 300%. At least I think benevolent is the right word. That's when someone gives you just enough kindness to look past the suffering you've endured, right? With added productivity, drills give 4 times the ore. These 4 drills I placed, basically 16 drills. Yeah, that's a whole half lane. And now expansions were a lot more manageable. Just had to keep a lookout for the biters and the cave-in. Ah, forgot about that effect. Anyway, just had to keep a lookout for biters and cave-ins. I can't catch a break, but I did manage to get enough iron to start on the steel lane. There were a lot of inserters here that can be built the wrong way, so a good chunk of it didn't work. To be more specific, any furnace you see here that isn't glowing is non-functional. That's about 40% of them. And of course there were some invincible belts to deal with as well, and the bots were not particularly helpful. I know they're supposed to repair things, but I want that belt destroyed. I can't believe it's taken this long, but 7 hours in and I finally have a full steel lane. It could be considered schmooving by some metric, but only if the standard is very low. Of course, the universe doesn't want me to schmoove since ore is backing up. Mixed belts are throttling production a lot. That's where the tunnel and loaders come into play. I can use the loaders to fill the tunnel and limit it using both circuitry and filters. The filters guarantee some of each resource can always pass through, and the logic lets me prioritize certain belts. This is especially useful for prioritizing a heavily mixed lane before supplementing it with a mostly pure belt. Since the silo is a 9x9 square, that means I can have up to 36 belts being filtered through the silo without losing any throughput. If only I'd noticed the loaders earlier, this is so much easier than buffer chests. Oh, but there's even more I overlooked. The second tunnel gives me direct access to coal for plastic, and I also have easy access to stone for landfill. I had noticed the potential of directly crafting from the tunnel back when I built the mall, but using 2 of them to reduce spaghetti space up top just did not occur to me until now. I'd say I'm getting the hang of things again, and I finally have the resources to build a large blue science build, even if it did have a lot of misrotated inserters in the blueprint. But you know what? I don't think it matters. Given enough time, a group of monkeys would eventually write Shakespeare. Given enough inserters, our bots might eventually place one the right way. I mean, just look at how many were built correctly in my red and green circuit expansions. A whole 70% of them. 60 inserters had to be painstakingly corrected to make the build run full speed. Can't blame the bots for my lab expansions though, since that one was hand-built. If I was going to research at 3 times the cost, I needed more than a handful of labs. I also needed to go to bed, so I stopped there for the day. After a good night's sleep, I returned well rested and able to mine much faster. Extra mining speed might have been a mistake. I can no longer react fast enough to stop cave-ins. That's okay, at least we can make the surface safe. I added some turrets in key areas, even if they weren't completely on my side, to defend against biters which also weren't on my side. Once I felt safe enough, I expanded power and set up sulfuric acid for blue circuits. The sulfuric design was bog standard, but the processing units, I'm pretty proud of what I came up with. It doesn't use inserters, and instead it uses a series of loaders and splitters. It had 10 times the upfront cost, but at least it's guaranteed to run when it works. I do have to overlook the fact that a single coin on the belt breaks it. Now the base wasn't completely safe due to some small gaps in my defenses, but I needed to start buffering the blue chips. Biters could easily slip by and destroy chests along with all the items inside of them. On belts, the items just drop to the ground, so I use that as a buffer instead. The only downside is that it takes up a lot more space. This 7x30 rectangle only holds 17 stacks of circuits, whereas a single iron chest can hold 32 stacks. As it stands, the circuits are already draining my resource buffer, so I really don't want to lose them. Of course, it didn't help that a random permanent yellow belt bottlenecked my copper production, causing it to work at 70% speed. Yeah, permanent structures can't be upgraded. At least I noticed a new way to search for broken belts. Map view. Red belts are red on the minimap, so I just needed to look for the yellow dots. 3,000 hours in this game, and I'm just now learning that belt color shows on the map. Never mind. The mod added that. Can I trust anything? Oh, I can. I can trust the cave-ins to always happen. It's time for a furnace redesign. Every gap in the furnaces will now be packed with walls and some lamps for the viewers like you. Eventually, these got upgraded with undergrounds for even higher wall density. Undergrounds which, I might add, randomly craft in odd numbers instead of pairs. That's such a meaningless effect, but I'm glad there are some silly ones thrown in. Alright, now that it's much more consistent to expand without causing cave-ins and my base is semi-functional again, I can finally wall in my entire base. Flamers are a must, and they surprisingly work in water. Who am I to question the laws of physics? All I needed to unlock these flamers was a small military science setup. I also spent my hard-earned cash on some Power Armor Mark II for added security. There's now space for speed upgrades and some laser defenses. I bought this just in time to defend against a wave of spitters. And a second wave of spitters. Yeah, I really needed that flame wall ASAP. Technically, these turrets could go rogue as well, but they only face one direction, so it's not like they can turn to attack me. To start, I just built one turret every 20 or so tiles. The upfront cost is a bit expensive, so the goal is to maximize coverage before doubling up. The pipes are set back far enough from the wall so a spitter couldn't cut fuel to the entire base with a single attack. I'd only lose a small segment rather than the entire flame wall. 11 hours in and I was finally safe. Somehow. I was so sure that all of these walls would be worthless when spiders learned to fly. That never happened. I guess the mod can cut us a break. Huh? Seriously? The explosion spawns biters now? And worms? Good to know I'm not completely safe after all. Luckily I'm close to bots and they can repair any damage caused by the randomly spawned worms. If you needed a reference for timescale, I started rushing towards bots about 5 hours ago and I'm just now getting roboports. Just the roboports. The bots themselves aren't automated, but at least I can order those off of Amazon. That's still enough to keep my base repaired while I fix stuff underground. And oh boy was there a lot to fix. A single coin kept half my stealing from working, my ore sorter was a mess, and worms just materialize out of thin air now. The coin and the worm were gone in a flash, but the ore sorter took a bit to fix. I had to switch all of the belts over to filtering through the tunnel. On the bright side, I'm really starting to see the lines when it comes to fixes. Oh, this belt is permanent and I can't mess with it anymore? Not a problem. Once I finally returned to the light again, I built actual bot production instead of relying on the subscription model. The bot components were pretty straightforward. Advanced oil is mostly set up, so I just need to swap recipes and add a lube plant, and then batteries were just missing a bit of copper and iron. The rest was just a few belt connections, and then we got bots. Now that I have bot assemblers, my base is finally safe, so long as I can supply it a steady supply of oil and repair packs. Only one problem. This is effectively the final size of my base since I can't invest the time to expand outwards. Guess that means we have to upgrade what we got. First things first, chest upgrades. We have to start with these each time so bots can grab building supplies. Unfortunately, many of the chests are unmineable and therefore can't be upgraded even by bots, so I placed a second chest with an inserter next to it. As I mentioned earlier, destroying the chest destroys the items, so my usual plan doesn't work, and I didn't want to spend the time transferring stuff by hand. Other than that, I'd say the upgrade progress was going pretty good. I had some production for most resources, and the base was safe enough that I could swap over to real buffers for blue chips. The key word here being safe enough because there's still the random enemy scares and the rogue turrets, which, by the way, can be auto-built and rogue at the same time. I was not expecting that one. Alright, it should be safe enough now that I can focus on the final two sciences. This time around, I started with yellow science. 2/3 of it was already done with the frames and the blue circuits, but I was still missing the low density structure. To save some space, I wove red underground belts beneath the yellow underground belts and then spent a few minutes fixing failed rotations. Another way I saved space was by landfilling the lake. It was a lot of landfill, but bots could work on that while I built a few more drills. I've become quite good at it by now, so I'm averaging 5 seconds per drill placed instead of 30. It's still a lot higher than the 1 second it should normally take, but hey, progress is progress. That should be enough drills for a while, so now it's time for something I've been dreading. Connecting LDS. Plastic and steel had to pass all the way through the base, which was tricky to say the least. And of course, now there's no room for the copper lane. To get around this, I purchased another tunnel and sent copper through the underground. Sure, there were rocks to destroy, but at least I didn't have to weave through assemblers. I didn't expect placing the tunnel to be the hardest part here. There couldn't be any entities blocking the surface, and I had to clear a 9x9 area without causing a cave-in. Eventually, I did manage to build the tunnel, grabbed more copper ore, and had plenty of place for a low-density structure and blue circuits. If you're wondering, I spent nearly an hour down here to place one tunnel and connect a copper patch. My base would have been absolutely wrecked during this time if I didn't have the flamer wall. It would have been even more wrecked since I spent the next hour down here as well fixing mixed ore distribution. Unfortunately, this part of my base was beneath the lake and I couldn't really fit a tunnel down here. That left me with a much less effective splitter system like I used to use. The ore sorter was a bit of a mess because I supplemented the belts with rocks I had mined. Basically, the mostly pure belts had random junk on them. Thanks to the cave-ins, sending the impurities elsewhere was tedious, but I did manage to send them to their respective lanes with priority to make sure they got cleared first. When I finally resurfaced, I had to do similar distribution fixes but for oil. My advanced oil processing plants were being handled in a very basic way with very minimal cracking. It was mostly just being buffered. The byproduct should be converted into petroleum for plastic, and then the rest can be sent to a large power plant. Power that's much needed, I might add, considering I had to triple my lab capacity to make up for Marathon's triple science. Finally, I can work on the science assemblers themselves and not just the components for them. This time I have a new trick to minimize rotation errors, or at least the damage from them. Filter inserters. By blacklisting or whitelisting specific items, the inserters can't output in the wrong belt if it gets built the wrong way. It's not the biggest risk since wrong inserters will make it that the machine just never runs, but I tend to hand feed stuff a lot, which makes it that it can run without having the correct inserters. Definitely worth the additional 6 circuits compared to a regular inserter, and still a little bit cheaper than a loader. Excellent, the ambitious yellow science is now complete. Overly ambitious, one might say. My green chip production is so incredibly low that I had to salvage any spare chips from around the base and send them to science. There's no way I can run 30 of these suckers. Guess we needed more furnaces and drills. I'll keep it brief. Lots of iron, lots of upgrades, and lots of bork splitters. My base is finally running at its full speed again. Or not. There is one final effect that the mod had to add. Expensive mode. I had heard that recipe changes weren't possible while the game was running, so I was so sure I was safe from this kind of change. But nope, I was dead wrong. In expensive mode, many basic recipes get more expensive. Steel cost is doubled, low density structure takes 6 times the plastic, and green circuits consume additional iron and cables. There are other recipe changes, but these are the 3 that really affected me the most. The expensive mode differences also screw with ideal ratios, so the builds that I had perfectly balanced no longer run full speed. Of these 3, plastic was the easiest to fix. Refineries and cracking have no inserters, so bots can place them consistently. It's really just a matter of getting the plastic to LDS, especially now since I'm throughput limited with the 6-fold increase in plastic cost. A quick way to double our throughput was to swap the belt weaving from a yellow belt input to a red belt input. Originally I just chose the color randomly because the throughput didn't matter at the time. Even with the input belt upgrade, I wasn't getting quite enough plastic, so I supplemented the remaining throughput with the red belt weaving across the assemblers. I'll fix the remaining expensive mode recipes later, but first I have to start buffering prod modules for purple science. For the modules, I used the same type of filter inserter trick as I did with yellow science. Although this time it was filtered for both production modules and speed modules, so I can swap them once research is finished. Now for the bulk of the purple drink assemblers. It has a lot of inserters. For any of the science assemblers to work, it needs all 10 inserters to be rotated the right way. As a rough calculation, we can take the odds of a rotation succeeding raised to the inserter count. In this case, that's 75% to the power of 10. In other words, each purple drink assembler has less than a 6% chance to work. I'm feeling pretty lucky because at least one assembler had the correct inserters. But you know what? Didn't even matter. There's almost no chance of it working if you connect the wrong belts. Oh, by the way, while I was connecting sciences, I stumbled across another culprit for my resource limitations. It wasn't just the expensive mode. I forgot to limit some boxes and buffered 16,000 each of the first couple sciences. The goal was to limit the need for a science expansion by overproducing early, but I didn't need this many. At least they're done producing now, but I still had to tackle the root of my material shortages. Expensive mode recipes. I sent spare iron to a new steel lane, now upgraded with those undergrounds to reduce cave-ins. Notice I said reduce. Want to know why I couldn't stop this cave-in? My hotbar changed. This mod slowly replaces my quick access items with random junk. Normally it's just slightly bothersome, but in this case the walls I kept on my hotbar to react to cave-ins were replaced by rocket fuel. But hey, at least I managed to upgrade the lane. Now that steel seems good, I can put off circuits once again and work on the next rocket component. Rocket control units. This might be the last time I ever build them. Hope they enjoy their retirement. Trying to be clever, I used another loader splitter design. Turns out that was a mistake. I've mentioned the cost of the loaders before, but it's nothing compared to the wasted internal buffer, which loaders basically ignore. For assemblers running at this speed, the internal buffer is about 2 RCUs worth of resources before the inserters deactivate. A little wasteful, but it's nothing compared to the entire stack of resources that loaders add into the assembler. I thought my RCU build was lacking resources, but nope. Most of it was crafted and just poorly distributed. Took quite a bit of elbow grease to reallocate those. I could have just waited around and left the RCUs alone, but the speedrunner in me wouldn't let that happen. If I could reasonably speed it up, I would. I brought spare green chips over from the original mall using a weird flippity-flop, and then designed a new green chip build for expensive mode. Due to the prod modules, I couldn't have a perfect ratio, so I had 6 cable assemblers feeding into a pair of electric circuit assemblers. Considering how important these things are, I wish I built it farther from the wall, but at least I didn't lose large buffers whenever the assemblers died. Alrighty, I believe my base is finally updated for expensive mode. Time for the remaining silo and rocket parts. Up first was concrete, which seemed to be more expensive, but no, it turns out I just had the wrong recipe because of the unsorted menu. But what about rocket fuel? Now that one seems more expensive, right? Oh. Huh. That's the same price as vanilla too. Why is this scenario so effective at making me doubt everything I know about this game? It's fine. I know nothing about the game I put 3,000 hours into. Cool. At least I still know that the beacons help with launching rockets quickly, and I know that loaders will be great for filling the silo. Okay, that sounded a bit thick with sarcasm, but they really were nice for that. What's not nice is this turret. It's quite mean actually, and destroyed a good chunk of my circuit build. The replacement turrets weren't very nice either, and neither were their replacements. Pretty abysmal luck, but I can look past that. The launch was so close now that I couldn't do anything meaningful to speed it up. I wanted to kill some time by gathering some coins to launch, but after a near-death experience, I decided to just wait patiently. Nearly 20 hours in, and I was finally finished with this gaslighting run. I don't know what is real and what isn't, and I definitely don't know who I can trust. All I know is Give me 1 second. Okay, so apparently I'm not done. It turns out the goal is to launch not 1 rocket, but 10. And they have to have satellites in them, which is another couple thousand science away. Satellites require 2 things I haven't automated yet: accumulators and solar panels. Neither of which worked initially, but I did manage to spaghetti them through the base and cram a satellite assembler near the silo. To prevent overproduction of satellites, I hand-fed exactly 1 stack of radars, just barely enough to craft 10 satellites. Since there's still 10 launches to go, I'm not going to show all of them. The satellites will allow the silo to auto-launch while I go work on other things and try to expand my base a bit. Quick question, you all see this weird purple square at the top of the screen, right? Doesn't matter. My sanity is already gone and I need to get back to the base upgrades. RCUs weren't sustainable with the loader design, so I gave in and used a boring inserter setup instead. Oh, and of course we have one last reason to declare the loader design a failure. A single coin is all it takes to break it. Inserter designs need about 4 to break, and the coins are much more visible in that case. After clearing the coins, I pushed some biter bases to keep oil running, which didn't go great. Big biters had a lot more health than I thought. I also needed some more power since the old plant was already at its limits. I had the perfect spot for it too. Just had to pull out my deconstruction planner for the labs first. Since research was completely finished, I had a fair amount of assemblers idled. I spent a while salvaging whatever I could and sent it over to Blue Circuit production. Once those are repurposed, I made my last trip to the mines to claim a couple more patches. Once I got there, personal lasers started to go rogue on me. Indirectly at least. A biter base spawned while I was mining and was immediately destroyed by my lasers. This released a much larger swarm of biters that I wasn't ready for. In an effort to escape, I cut a shortcut right into another group of biters. Nowhere is safe anymore. And now I don't even have armor. Never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually happy coins are littered everywhere now. I scavenged just enough to buy a small armor set and a rocket launcher. That's more than enough firepower to recover my body. I thought I was safe after clearing the nest, but I didn't notice the giant pool of acid beneath me. Third time's the charm. Without any armor on, the only way to recover my body was to get some cardio in. Now that the armor's back on, I could safely expand coal, which was the last thing I thought I would need. The original buffers kept overflowing, so I wasn't expecting to run out. Of course, those expectations were before I knew my coal and plastic requirement would be 60 times higher, so that explains it. I'm gonna need a lot of coal. I still had to deal with biters popping up while I expanded, but at least I had a rocket launcher now to deal with them. Though the rockets almost killed me. Wait, no. Not just almost. Okay, time to scavenge more coins and try to not explode this time. No, I said I don't want to explode. I barely even have a weapon to deal with this right now. Why is there another so soon? I'm so glad that I didn't tear my original defense turrets down because they're the only thing that saved me from the big biter. You know what? I clearly can't survive on foot. Let's try a tank this time. Much nicer. I was staying in acid again. At least I took out the biters first so I could finish connecting the coal. Now to patch up my base with whatever band-aids I could find. Those band-aids included copper redistribution, speed modules and the cable assemblers, a copper expansion, and a whole lot of spaghetti all around. I was no longer iron or copper limited anymore, just limited in general. Everything was running about as well as it could in the space I had, and there's not enough time left to justify more smelters. I'm only a couple launches away from finishing, and I really don't think resources would arrive before I finish the run. I mean, you've seen how long it takes to build drills. I swear 75% of this run was mining rocks. At best, all I could justify were some belt upgrades to ensure throughput wasn't a problem. Unfortunately, these were very manual for 2 reasons. First, some things are unmineable, ergo they're unupgradable. Second, I had belt weaving everywhere. That's the alternating red and yellow belt setup that I use in LDS and a couple other spots to spaghetti stuff through. If I were to upgrade all of the yellow belts in my base to red, then the weaving would be interrupted and only one of the lanes would pass through. To avoid this, I had to upgrade it piece by piece. For some reason, I only had a single red splitter to perform these upgrades, and it was auto-built somewhere. The last thing I expected from this scenario was the sadistic Where's Waldo. As soon as I found that splitter, upgrades were complete, and it was time to wait for the remaining launches. Aside from general maintenance if anything broke, there's absolutely nothing I could do to speed up the remaining launches at this point. Now, I don't have great footage of this moment since I tabbed out to work on speedrun designs, but at long last, I'm free of this gaslighting hellscape. Wait, no, that's a death screen. A random worm got me. Okay, now I'm done. Never mind, it's just another death screen. Okay, now I've launched my final rocket. I don't know why there's not a victory screen, but this was the win condition I was given by the mod author, so... Wow, would you look at that? We beat the game. That run was a complete headache. Every time I got used to something, it got mixed up. I wasn't even convinced some of it really happened, and I'm still uncertain about some effects. I'm looking at you, Magic Drills. But it was a lot of fun. If you enjoyed and want to see more, don't forget to subscribe and check me out at twitch.tv/antipatience. I do dumb stuff every Monday and less dumb stuff most other days of the week. Thank you so much for watching.